Pope Leo XIV celebrates his first Mass the day after becoming the first American to lead the Catholic Church. He returned to the Sistine Chapel to pray with the cardinals who elected him. Leo said his election is both a cross to bear and a blessing.
I invite you to recognize the marvels that the Lord has done, the blessings that the Lord continues to pour out upon all of us. Through the ministry of Peter, you have called me to carry that cross and to be blessed with that mission. And I know I can rely on each and every one of you to walk with me as we continue.
The Vatican announced Pope Leo will be formally installed as Pope during a Mass on May 18th. The 69-year-old Pope is Chicago-born Cardinal Robert Prevost. The announcement of his election brought cheers of joy and flag waving, especially among stunned Americans in St. Peter's Square. Leo called on Christians to renew their faith. He says a lack of faith is leading to the loss of human dignity around the world. The Vatican released the official document known as a Rogito, confirming the election of Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as Pope Leo XIV. It was signed by 3 Vatican officials and states. The cardinal chose his own papal name. Meanwhile, as expected on newspaper headlines, the American Pope is on the front pages, as you can see here, on news outlets across the country. And we have team coverage of Leo's first full day as Pope. CBS News contributor John Allen is in Rome, and CBS News correspondent Lana Zach, she is in the Pope's hometown of Chicago. Let's start, though, with John Allen. John, good to see you today. The world seems surprised by the election of an American to lead the church, but should we be when we consider the changes in the church in recent years?
Hi there, Mughal. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but it is a blustery afternoon in Rome, which is symbolically apt because there is a new wind blowing in the Vatican and in the global Catholic Church under history's first American Pope, Pope Leo XIV. You ask, should we be surprised? You know, hindsight is always 20/20, and I think if we look back at this election, it is very clear he checked all of the boxes these 133 cardinals who elected him were looking for. They wanted a missionary, somebody who would reach out to people and inspire them and light the fires of the faith. They wanted a statesman, somebody who can engage the vital issues on the global stage, issues such as immigration and climate change and poverty. And they wanted a governor, somebody who can take the reins in his own hands, particularly here in the Vatican, including a very serious financial mess that he's going to have to clean up. And if you go through his profile, he ticks all of those boxes. He brings all of those qualities to the job. Now, that said, I'm going to admit to you, Mugo, that when his name was announced, when we heard that fateful habemus papam moment, I was flabbergasted because, like everyone else, I was brought up on the notion that there could never be an American Pope. And like so many bits of conventional wisdom, we now know that just ain't so.
Yeah, never say never. All right, so the new Pope's brother called him a second Pope Francis. Do you think Pope Leo will follow in the progressive footsteps of Pope Francis?
Oh, I think Pope Leo is very much committed to carrying forward Pope Francis's legacy, but I think in his own way. You know, Pope Francis was a maverick, and he was a little bit of a live wire. I think we're going to see Pope Leo is a little bit more reserved, a little bit more cautious, a little bit more thoughtful, perhaps. But in his own way, I think he's going to want to very much continue to press the issues that were at the core of Pope Francis's agenda, particularly when it comes to the social teaching of the Church. Remember, the choice of the name Leo is, in a sense, a whole program of governance in one word. It refers back to Pope Leo XIII in the late 19th century, who founded the modern tradition of Catholic social teaching, which has at its core the defense of the poor and the defense of the underdog. I think Francis wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. I think you're going to see Pope Leo pick up that megaphone and use it to great effect, Mugo.
And sticking with that same question, in line with that, from what you've heard so far from Pope Leo, from this new Pope, any indications of the kind of Pope that he will ultimately be?
Well, I think it is telling that you heard in that address he gave from the central loggia of St. Peter's Basilica on Thursday night when he stepped out as the new pope. The fundamental call was to unity. Unity, first of all, in the Catholic Church, and then radiating out to all of humanity. I think by temperament, Robert Prevost, the man who is now Pope Leo XIV, is a bridge builder. He is a centrist. He is absolutely unideological. He is a pragmatist at heart. And I think when he sees divisions, he wants to heal them. When he sees conflicts, he wants to end them. And I think that's going to be his program from beginning to end. I will say that's the man I've known prior to his election as Pope, and that's very much what I expect to see from him going forward.
All right, John Allen in Rome for us. Thank you so much for joining us on 24/7 today. Appreciate it.
CBS News papal contributor Candida Moss. She's also professor of theology at the University of Birmingham in England. Good morning to you. Thanks for being here with us on such a big day. I want to start by understanding the significance of the name Leo. What does that mean, and what did you make of his first address?
Good morning. It's exciting to be here.
I bet.
So the name is really important. It's our first clear sign of the kind of Pope that he's going to be. And his predecessor, Pope Leo XIII, is the architect of Catholic social justice. He spoke about workers' rights and the importance of caring for the poor. And so we should expect more of that from Pope Leo. But we have to bear in mind that the first Pope Leo, Leo the Great, was also a great intellectual who clarified church teaching. So we might see that. And he's also someone who spoke up to and brokered peace with secular leaders. And so we might see someone who's going to be a peace broker in the world.
And what jumped out at you from his first public remarks?
Yeah, this was really interesting. So he did call back to Francis and spoke appreciatively of him. He also spoke about synodality, which was about sort of decentralizing Catholic power, something that Pope Francis was really interested in. And he talked about walking with those at the margins and the suffering. And so we should expect a pope in the mold of Pope Francis.
And what do you make of the relatively short time it took to place these votes, and that the so-called front runner, the favorite, Paramount, who was very close to Pope Francis, did not win? What does that mean to the rest of us?
Well, that was very surprising. You know, when it turned out it was such a short conclave, we all thought, well, it must be Paramount, the front runner, the favorite. But it wasn't, and that shows that his support was a lot softer. I think what hurt Paramount was he was so closely associated with Pope Francis, whereas Pope Leo has had this kind of meteoric ride. He's not a career bureaucrat. I think a lot of this is about appeasing the conservative wing of the College of Cardinals, who were unhappy with certain parts of Pope Francis's papacy. And it really shows that they did come to a decision very quickly around someone who's going to be a pope for the entire church.
And he has not, Pope Leo the 14th, been as welcoming in previous statements to LGBTQ people, to marriage when it comes to that either, correct?
That's correct. This is one of the issues on which he's been more traditional, more conservative, you might say, although this is church teaching. And I think this is one of the reasons that he was elected.
Candida Moss, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we're also following the excitement in the U.S. and specifically in Chicago, where Pope Leo the 14th is from. CBS News Chicago spoke to the new Pope's brother about his rise to the papacy and why he thinks he will be a second Pope Francis.
In his heart, in his very soul, he wanted to be a missionary. He didn't want the bishop, he didn't want the cardinal, but that's what he's asked to do, so that's what he did. He would have liked to go back to Peru and work with the missions because he had a deep feeling for the disenfranchised, for the poor, for those who were not listened to. And he had a very strong feeling, and I think in that way he will be a second Pope Francis.
Now, if the name Robert Prevost sounded at all familiar to you, it's because one of our guests identified him as a frontrunner on this very show on Wednesday. This is why I always say you're in the right place watching us. Listen to this.
I want to throw out a name that I think would be interesting in the United States, and that is Robert Prevost, because he was born in Chicago. And I think he may be emerging as a potential front runner. He's 69. He spent 2/3 of his life outside of the United States. So that might absolve him of this problem that many of the cardinals have had. We can't have an American pope.
And James is back with us now, live from Rome. He is the executive editor of the National Catholic Reporter. James, what was it like listening back to your accurate prediction? And I'm guessing that means that you were the least surprised person yesterday.
Well, he was who I picked in the pool for my family pool back in Missouri. But I have to tell you, is even though he was my pick, in my wildest dreams, honestly, I did not expect an American Pope.
Wow.
And my Catholic teaching tells me I need to be humble today. But if you were reading ncronline.org, you might want to have gone off to the bookie, because 1 in 12 of our top papal frontrunners was one of the picks that got picked Pope the other night.
Yeah, I know you don't gamble, but I think I did read that on the book, someone who bet 1,000 got $63,000 back. But what now does this mean for the Catholic Church and the direction it will take, considering exactly what you just said on Wednesday, that he's almost a moderate, a centrist choice?
Yeah. And given, I think, what we're seeing today from his first Mass in the Sistine Chapel, he's doubling down on the Pope Francis papacy. I think there's no question that this is the direction he wants to go. His biography about reaching out to the peripheries and that clip from his brother is a strong indication. But one thing you didn't mention was he also talked about in this Mass today, which in the homily he began in English and then went into Italian. He talked about the dangers of clericalism, which was a big issue with Pope Francis. He said he admonished and cautioned the cardinals in the College of Cardinals who were gathered in the Sistine Chapel that they need to make themselves small so they can open themselves up to Christ. And that's a way of saying, you know, be with the people, listen to the people, don't, you know, tower over or be, the boss of the people, essentially.
One area in which he may differ with the late Pope Francis, though, is that on the rights of the LGBTQ and their place in the church, especially when it comes to marriage and adoption. What do we know about his stance on those topics?
Well, I think you have to also clarify that Pope Francis never once changed the liturgy. I mean, the teaching of the church. He never changed the teaching of the church on those issues, right? He wanted to include LGBT. He said, todos, 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 everyone come to the church, but he never revised the teaching of the church. So my response to that is wait and see. I mean, as you know, when we pick a Supreme Court justice, you never know how they're going to rule on a case. That's not that different from a pope. And you also have to remember, it's a very old church. And so making any kind of change, if you change something in a century, that's like a year in sort of American time.
James is batting 1,000 this week, so take that prediction with that in mind. James Grimaldi, great to have your insight with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Errol. It's good to see you.
All right, let's bring in CBS News national correspondent Lana Zak. She is in front of the Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. Lana, good morning to you. We're all wondering if this Pope is going to bring deep dish pizza to Italy now. What has the reaction been where you are?
Are you trying to start something right now, talking about Italian pizza and Chicago-style deep dish? I will tell you, though, that there is a hot dog joint here in Chicago, another famous Chicago staple, that currently has up on its sign, written in Latin, "He ate our dogs," meaning that this Pope is so accessible, not only to Chicagoans, but to Americans as a whole. And, I was reading NCR when they were coming up with their different stats about who we should be watching. And the very first line about this contender said it's typically absurd to think of an American Pope because given that the 2,000 years of Catholic history, there's never been an American Pope, but also because there's been a perception in the Catholic Church that given America's power and influence in the world, that it would be outsized to have an American Pope. It speaks to who he is, both as an American and as an international figure that he really has transcended some of those biases to be able to become a pope. And my goodness, are people here in Chicago celebrating it. Actually, at Holy Name Cathedral behind me, they changed out that bunting that you see from the black shrouds to commemorate the passing of Pope Francis, now to a celebratory white and gold. As all of Chicago and this country, the Catholics are rejoicing to know that one of their own has now taken up that head position.
And while Pope Leo XIV had moved to Peru, naturalized there, become a citizen, he was born where you are and spent his early life there.
Right.
What did he do in Chicago, and what can you tell us about the early part of his biography?
He was a Chicago South Side boy, and he rooted for the Red Sox. He rooted for the White Sox. They're actually sending a jersey over to him in Rome that says Pope Leo on it now. But he was an altar boy in so many ways. He was just an accessible Chicago boy. Listen to what his brother had to say. His brother living just about an hour from where I'm standing right now.
You know how some kids like to play war and be soldiers, and some girls want to play dolls and be housewives. He wanted to play priest. And so he took our mom's ironing board and put a tablecloth over it, and we had to go to Mass. And we went to Mass, and he knew everything. He knew his prayers in Latin, he knew his prayers in English, and he did that all the time. And he took it totally serious. It was not a joke. It was not a game. He was dead serious about it.
He was educated here in Catholic schools, and actually his parents came from that as well. His dad, an educator, his mom, a librarian, and all of them deeply rooted in the Catholic faith. So it's perhaps not surprising that we heard that from his brother. Errol?
Yeah, and Lana, you know what it's like to have siblings. Is that brother dealing with not being the favorite in the family anymore? Who knows what comes next? Lana Zach, live for us in Chicago. Great to see you, Lana. Have a great weekend.
You know, it's interesting, John, as we were talking about and exploring that question of how he may be different than Pope Francis. I know you've said that he's more pragmatic, more cautious, maybe more discreet, but he has also been outspoken on the issue of immigration and migrants, for instance. So he too, like you said, we don't know. He could too also be a revolutionary pope.
Oh, very much so. I mean, one thing I think you can take to the bank is that Pope Leo XIV is an extremely thoughtful man. And he is going to believe in his heart, in his soul, that God has put him in this role not to waste it, but to do something special with it. And I think you heard him say he wants to do that in concert with the other cardinals and all those in the church. But I think he realizes he has been chosen to lead. And he is going to want to take advantage of that. And I think on all kinds of issues, immigration is certainly one. I mean, and of course, he understands the immigration issue on both sides of the coin, because as an American, he understands what it's like to be from a receiving nation. But as a bishop from Peru, he also understands what it's like for those who embark on the journey of immigration. And so we'll have a great understanding of that issue. But there is this alchemy that goes on when a man is elected pope. Pope Francis used to say, because it was always so surprising, his reputation in Argentina was being sort of cold, distant, aloof, and yet when he became pope, he became this electric, maverick figure, and people would ask him, where did that come from? And he would always say, the grace of office. And I think something similar is going to happen with Pope Leo XIV. And as you say, where it may lead, it's difficult to predict at the moment, but it's going to be something electric.
Are you able to characterize his worldview over the past few decades, where he stands on issues, how he approaches the issues of the moment?
Well, the one thing I would say is that he is not an ideologue. He is like whatever the opposite of an ideologue is, that's him. He has an extremely pragmatic and open approach to issues. I don't think you will find him consistently coming down, either consistently on the left or the right of issues. I think he will strive for balance. And I think there are going to be times where he's going to frustrate conservatives, and there will be other moments when he frustrates liberals, which is probably the dictionary definition of hitting it down the middle.
What is remarkable, too, about this choice, an American, the first, who holds dual citizenship in Peru as well is that he was just named cardinal by Pope Francis in 2023.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that would make him, therefore, a papabile so quickly. So it seems to me also the American factor is very interesting here because common wisdom has always been no, an American is too black and white. An American doesn't have that nuance that we have here in the Italian Vatican in order to be part of the Curia even and to understand how these things work. But it was precisely probably that is helpful to him in organization, in all of the characteristics that Italians tend to think of as an American, very organized, very black and white and yes and no. And then at the same time, the Peru connection, which would give him just that South American flair.
In many ways, I think we're going to say this was the perfect choice. We have a pope who has lived in South America, knows the United States of America, and has a missionary heart. He said it himself in his opening address, has a great theological background. Yeah, I think this is the Pope that we need at this time.
Yeah, he mentioned he wants the church to be charitable to those who are suffering.
Yes.
He hit that theme a number of times.
And he knows it firsthand. He's a missionary. He moved from Chicago to a poor diocese in Peru. He knows his people. He knows their needs. He himself, he quoted St. Augustine, which I thought was very interesting. He said, "With you I am a Christian, for you I am a bishop." In other words, I am one of you.
Yeah.
We have talked about that he speaks 5 languages, and as we've seen the Holy Father travel around the world, Pope Francis was prolific in his travel. I guess we should note the languages that he speaks. In addition to English, he speaks Spanish, which we heard him speak today, Italian, we heard him speak that, French, Portuguese, and then, as I mentioned, he can read Latin and German. How important is that when you go and travel around the world?
It's extremely important. I think what is interesting is that John Paul, of course, was the great revolutionary. Now, Paul VI was the first pope to travel outside of Europe, outside of Italy. But John Paul II, of course, put papal travel on the map, right? 104 trips to 129 different countries. He traveled 2.5 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon during the course of his almost 27-year papacy. Incredible. And at the time, people thought maybe that was a unique charism of John Paul II. And both Pope Benedict and Pope Francis came into office saying, I'm not really sure I'm going to travel as much as John Paul did. And they both ended up taking trips at the same exact annual clip as John Paul, because what they discovered is that travel is an absolutely indispensable tool for a pope to make himself present to the people. When a pope chooses to go someplace, it means the world to that place. And it makes the pope present to a particular place, a particular people, in a way that coming through TV or social media or some other mediated fashion just cannot accomplish.
He has used social media himself, too, so he can appeal to younger people.
Right? They probably won't use social media for the next pope choosing him, and they'll continue with the white smoke and the black smoke, which is just an amazing concept.